Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this week I'm delighted to be joined by Chris McIlwain and Jim Orr. Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. Jim Orr and Chris McIlwain. We are here in Barras Art and Design, and it's the end of a week that had so much promise. Jim, I'm going to start off with Europe. We're then going to talk transfer windows. Then we're going to talk about decision makers, and we're going to end up with Brendan Rodgers and the future of Celtic. So let's start off with transfers. Going into the transfer window, were you quite relaxed? Did you think we were going to get the business done, Jim?
No, of course we're not going to get the business done. We've never got the business done. And I think what do you say the definition of madness is? We'll do the same thing, expect something different. We knew that was going to happen. We knew that, said on the podcast, that was one of the three things that we're looking for. At the start of the transfer window, have we got all the signings in? No, we haven't. By the end of the transfer window, no, we haven't. So, no great surprise. I think the club's completely dysfunctional, top to bottom, inefficient, don't know what they're doing, fail to support the manager. I mean, the team performances, that's a different question. You talk about Europe and all that, you come to that. But you have to give the manager the tools to do the job. And not that I think we should still have enough to win this league. Europe becomes more of a challenge, even if it's Europa League. But you give the guy tools to do the job, and they haven't done that, so they've failed miserably. And I just think it's not the fact that they are inefficient and they're dysfunctional, it's they're allowed to be inefficient and dysfunctional, and they've been allowed to be like that for a number of years. So who is it that lets them be like that? Well, I think we all know the answer to that question. Until that changes, expect more of the same. And I think the phrase I've used in the last wee while on ACSOM is that I think on-field success is masked off-field inefficiencies, and that's been the case for a number of years. And it's only when you don't have on-field success the mask slips, and you can see this vast chasm. And I think since getting knocked out of the Champions League last week, anyone who was on the fence, and don't let's call people happy clappers, but that's the kind of term they use for people who are with the board. But anyone who was either sitting on the fence or was with the board, the chasm's opened up, and you can see all this stuff, and it doesn't make for particularly good viewing. And it will continue to be the same until we change how the club is organised, how the club is structured. Because you can bring in new managers and new chief executives and new directors of football and whatever the Paul Tisdale job is. You can do that till the cows come home, but it ain't going to change. So until there's change at the top, and how you do that, which we'll come on to that, that's a massive thing.
You know, we spoke a lot during the COVID season. Forget the fact that there was the global issues, right? But we spoke about culture during that season. Jim used to say it was my buzzword. Culture, always going on about culture.
And systemic.
Systemic, that's my new one.
I remember that.
The culture, though, is something, Chris, that hasn't changed. So Jim's right? You take that pawn. Jim's a chess player. Take that pawn and you move it. That's your manager. Right, but you're not making the decisions, you're not calling the shots. You're just a sacrificial lamb to the slaughter, and you'll be replaced. The environment will be the same.
Yep.
The game's the same.
Yep.
So how do you change a culture at a football club? How's that done in the here and now in the modern Celtic? This is the modern Celtic versus the Celtic that Jim fought against for change. Is it doable?
It is doable because it's been done before. And Jim is the right man to talk about that. When you look back at what happened in the 90s, and it got to the point where change had to happen, otherwise we weren't going to have a football club. The situation or the scenario is different in the sense that it's different stakes at the moment. We're no longer worried about the survival of our football club, but what we are worried about is the progression of our football club, our ability to grow beyond this old time remit of just being ahead of Rangers, for example, which has always been the kind of measuring stick. And I think there may be elements within the club.
Do you know people that's good enough for
yes,
friends
I
and family?
Yes, I do.
And that's their
Name them.
invite.
I'm not naming them.
Let's contact them.
Who are these people?
I'll never get invited.
You
back
will,
to
won't you? And I'm the same. I know people.
But it is.
That's good enough for them.
That has been the measuring stick for so long. But now I think there's a new generation of fans. I, like yourself, and certainly Jim, we came through the era of the 90s where, Rangers were dominant. They had some brilliant players. We had a couple of great managers and players, Tommy Burns comes to mind, but we were not where we wanted to be in a footballing sense, so we appreciate success when it comes. There's a new generation of fans that have only known success, you know, the next generation to us, and they've been kind of weaned on that success. But what they're looking at is, okay, where do we go from here? And Europe is the measuring stick now. You know, we always go back to the glory days of the 60s, the Lisbon Lions. I wasn't fortunate enough to see that live. My dad talks about it all the time. That's where we should be trying to get back to as a club, because we can't do any more domestically. The only way we can move domestically now is down. We can only regress domestically because we're dominant. So we have to start raising the bar, raise the measuring stick, raise the benchmark. And the platform to do that is Europe. Now, when you talk about culture, you need the powers that be within the club to recognise that as the ambition. But I think the culture at the club at the moment is stay one step ahead of the rivals. That'll be enough for the support. I think that's changing within the supporter groups.
Generational. I think you're right. So generational,
Yeah.
Jim. I'm not one of these people that looks down their nose at generation Celtic fans who have known nothing but success. I'm a bit jealous of the fact that they were born into this. I remember going to the centenary season. That was my first season as a fan, actually going to the games, right? And thinking this is the way it's always going to be. You know, you sign all these great players, McAvenny, Paul McStay's the best player in Scotland, sun-kissed cup finals, and you win the double. And it's happy birthday, dear Celtic. And I'm thinking, this is great. But I soon learned that it's not like that all the time. And it does galvanise you, but I'm not one of these people that's like, unless you've lived through that, you're not a real Celtic fan. I don't believe that for a moment. But that with that generational success, Jim, will come higher demands. Do you agree with that?
I just think that there's a lot of people very angry in the last 24 hours, but it's been pretty similar for the last 24 years in terms of what's going on behind the scenes. So think about the culture. The person at the top dictates the culture, and the evidence is there. And we're just ordinary punters that go to the games and get frustrated time after time after time. And when it comes to business, we can't place the boots of the person who seems to be the de facto running this organisation. So what do we know? And the point you've made before is basically, if you pose that question, he'll say, well, look at the trophies. And I would say, well, look at the trophies we haven't won, basically, because of what he's done. And we'll try to qualify for the Champions League and be at the big boys table 9 times and failed 7. So what does that tell you? And the analogy I made a few weeks ago, which I've said for many years since I used to be involved with kids football, we're like an under-18 team playing an under-12 league, basically. And there's another under-18 team across the river, basically. So you're going to win the league more often than not. If you're going to put that forward as, look at what we've done, I'm sorry, that's not enough. Because when you go into the under-18 league over there, you get your backside handed to you in a plate.
Yeah,
agree.
In fact, even for under 16 leagues, you get your backside handed to you in a plate. So that's not good enough. That has to change. But the difference between now and what the 90s were like was that the board were not wealthy individuals. The board were not financially savvy. The board were running out of money. The board had to build a stadium costing tens of millions of pounds. And at some point, the money would run out at that point. So if people started not going to the games and whatever, you kind of knew what the end point was going to be to that. And then Fergus wanders in, and if you know the history, then you know what happened next. It's different
There's a
now.
play about that, Jim.
There's a play about that. If you're not meant to advertising, this is actual, but hey, next August, that is McQueen. So sorry, couldn't. So yeah, this is much more difficult. And I think if we're going to talk about that, and people are saying we want another Fergus McCann, I think we want another Brian Dempsey is the kind of person I think we need. And by that, I mean that we need somebody who will galvanise the support. And that's what Brian Dempsey did. Somebody who's willing to put his head above the parapet. And I think, because people have told me, there are a number of Celtic supporters out there with very high net worth who probably would be willing to chip in a few bob. And by a few bob, I mean the tens of millions it would take to have a change. And that's assuming that the people who have the shares, not necessarily the main shareholder, not the majority shares, but the main shareholder, but other shareholders, if no one wants to sell their shares, then we are stuffed. However, I think what we do need is a Brian Dempsey type person who will put his head above the parapet, or he or she, sorry, and say, I've had enough of this. I have got X million pounds here and I want to put, say they've got £100 million, I want to put 10 into this. Who wants to put another 10, 5, 10? and gather some support amongst wealthy Celtic fans. Go to the supporters, go to the Green Brigade, go to the boys, go to the affiliation, go to the association, go to the podcasters, go to the bloggers, go to everyone. Say, look, we'd like to change this. We're putting the money up. You help us in any way you can. And that's banners and songs. And as long as you don't get personal with people, and as long as you do it very peacefully, there's nothing wrong with that to say that we would like change. We've had enough. Because there's a great interview with Fergus a month or so before he took over, and he was talking about the shareholders putting their heads in the sand. And he said what they have to understand is there are two other stakeholders in the room, and those are the bank, which at that point in time, the bank owned all the assets because they were £5 million in overdraft. So basically they took the assets, it's collateral, they owned the assets, and the supporters. And the supporters control every piece of income. And that's what we do, we control every piece of income. Now, when you talk about merchandising, well, that's us, basically.
We buy it.
Season tickets, that's us.
Yep.
And they can say, well, you get sponsorship. Well, why did Magnus sponsor Celtic and not sponsor Livingston? Why does Daffabet sponsor Celtic and not Livingston? You've got the TV deals. Well, why did they put Celtic in the TV? Because there's 60,000 people at the game. So the supporters control everything. And what I've seen over the past few weeks or so is that kind of understandable, though it may be, knee-jerk reaction. I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that, which is absolutely fine, and it'll make you feel good. Absolutely make you feel fine. Because I've done that myself. I didn't go to the game for 3 years. I said, I'm not going to that board's away. And then when they went away, I came back and I lost my good seat and never got it back. So I get that, and it makes you feel good to say that, you know what, I'm not getting a Europa League package, but I'll watch it on the telly. And I'll feel bad when the game starts because I'm not there. And that's my big concern about what's happening in the last few days, is that we use the term sack the board, and obviously you can't sack the board, but it's quite a nice wee handle to get to use. It means we don't like you. We'd like you to change. But equally important is the back the team bit.
Yes.
You can't have one without the other. And my big concern about this, my really big concern about this is that I think the sack the board bit, you're not going to do that overnight. You're not going to do that in 6 months, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You might never do that, but keep at it, keep going. The more immediate thing to me is the back the team bit. And what I would like to see basically is that, that we don't do anything that kind of rocks that boat. So when we're playing Kilmarnock weekend Sunday, whatever it is, that we're all behind the team. Maybe some of the players would be our choices. Maybe we want to better quality, but they're wearing the hoops.
Yeah.
And what we want to say is that at this point in time, we're 6 points clear out of what we think are, no disrespect to Hearts, of our main rivals. We haven't lost a goal yet. So domestically, we're looking pretty good. Don't spoil that. Don't make a mess of that. Because I've heard people saying, this is like the COVID season. No, yet it's not. Don't make it like the COVID season. The squad that we've got, we'd like it to be better, but they're better than 10 of the other 11 teams, and maybe better than that other team as well. Who knows? They strengthened, so it's a challenge. Embrace the challenge. Am I happy with it? No, I'm not. Of course I'm not. But let's embrace the challenge and let's back the team. And if there's going to be a chance of sack the board and whatever, don't do it during the game. Do it before the game starts. When the teams come out, you get behind the team. Do it half time, do it after. Go to the car park, do all that kind of stuff, banners, whatever. But I think they need a focal point. I think they need somebody who come forward, somebody, some person, some group who have got the financial wherewithal to actually go in and say, look, if we were given the opportunity to buy these shares, we've got the money to do that. Are you guys behind us, Green Brigade? And then they have the banners up, we support John Smith or whoever it is, sort of thing. So I think there has to be that coordinated campaign. I think, and I'm showing this myself, what I'm saying here, mini rant, is that we're all frustrated. We're all really frustrated, and it really shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. And it's that dysfunctional nature at the club that they don't seem to be getting on with each other, or they're making decisions which seems counterproductive. And if we as fans can see that, surely they can see that. And it's the fact it's been allowed to happen. Dysfunction, incompetence, always knock yourself out, go for it again next season, and next season, and next season. And I'll just back to what I said at the start there. On-field success, masks, off-field inefficiencies. The mask is now slipping, and we're looking at all these inefficiencies, and people are now getting on board. I would just caution that to say, don't do the knee-jerk reaction stuff.
Yeah.
If there's a coordinated campaign with, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before about objectives and the SMART objectives, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time barred. If you've got all these stuff and you're behind somebody or an organisation, sign me up.
Yeah.
I'm up for it. But I'm going to go to the Europa League games because I want to back a team.
Yeah.
I want to see them. When I want to see them do well, always want to see them do well. And I'm not supporting the board by doing this because you know what? I've got a season ticket, and if I don't go, you don't have a season ticket, so you'll buy my package anyway. So don't be bothered.
Absolutely.
You know, and not buying pies and all that stuff. If that's part of a coordinated campaign, brilliant. If it's just random, it's sporadic, sorry. If it's sporadic, it will make no difference.
Yeah.
And I get people's frustration because I'm frustrated, we're frustrated, and it's back to the Billy Connolly thing, day something. Day something, but day something. But it has to be coordinated, has to be organised, and we need a focal point. We need some sort of, Pied Piper, Robin Hood type person. It comes in with wearing green, comes in there, and that's we're going to follow this person.
Yeah.
We don't have that person yet. I know the Celtic Trust are attempting to do things, and that is the way forward. Get more shares. Now, get more shares through people who have the shares, and that's great. But at the moment, they've only got maybe 160,000 shares, and the major shareholders is it 32 million or something, So how long is that going to take?
Yeah.
I'll not be here by the time that gets there. But yeah, support that. That's a good avenue. And I'm sure the people who are involved in the Celtic Trust, or who might get involved in the Celtic Trust, will be these, I think, high net worth people who could take things forward. But we need a unified way forward because we won't support other people because you know what it's like, you know personally what it's like. You go on Sky Sports, who's this guy? He doesn't talk for me. Oh no, forget him.
Yeah, he used to support Wraith Rovers.
Aye.
I've heard that.
Get that Leanne Dempsey. Oh yeah,
Katie Lang.
Katie Lang. I was going to say.
Sorry, Katie Lang and
Gash Nesbitt.
Gash Nesbitt. Right. He speaks for Gash Nesbitt. He doesn't speak for us. So you'll never get a unified. And even if you get the one person to kind of try and take things forward, that will not be unanimous. That will be we don't. But as long as it gets the majority of fans, nothing will change until you get that rant over.
Even Fergus faced that though, Jim. And even you, as an originator of a movement, Save Ourselves, you faced that handing out your flyers, didn't you?
You've always got to remember that not everyone agrees with you. Not everyone is on social media. Not everyone will see this podcast. So basically, we shouldn't. Most football fans want to go and watch football. That's that. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
You don't really want to talk about. You shouldn't really know who the chief executive is, or the major shareholder is, or how many shares we have, or what you pay the chief executive. What you want to do is go to Celtic Park, watch the team playing really good football and being successful, and that's it. But the thing is, because of where we are just now, if I put them in boxes, over this box here, that's the people who run the club, who finance the club, who manage the club. That's that box there which we'd like to change. And over in this box here, that's the manager, that's the team, that's football. And we really want to sit in this box here.
Yeah.
But it's the impact and the influence that has. If that's dysfunctional, that makes that so much more. But we have to draw a line and say, we want to sort that box out. But while we're sorting that box out, don't affect that box at all.
Absolutely. I agree with Jim. I think we have to understand and direct any action to the right, to the right responsible party. And I think, it would be detrimental to take action that affects the team on the park, because that's just going to lead to more misery that we're in. And that sounds entitled, because look, we are winning, we are top of the league, so you want to maintain that. But what Jim's talking about there, you need people with the financial resources, the assets, the resources, the monetary weight or power to go in and make change. You also need the skills, and I think that's where you talk about Dempsey. I think is really important. You need someone who can actually bring a vision. I think you just talk about we want change. That'll resonate with some people, but it's not going to make a difference to all the fans. What you want is something that you can tangibly see will make a difference, right? You have to have, as Jim said, objectives, milestones, a plan for the short term, the mid-term, the long term. You want to see something that you can measure success and change against, and to say, well, if we do this, we can accomplish this, and here's how we're going to do it. And I think this has been my frustration sometimes with past iterations of the Celtic Trust, etc. And no disrespect to them, I know they're good people and they try very hard to make the right sort of changes. But you have to have something that you can deliver, you can realistically deliver. So yes, we have to bring all this money to the forefront in order to compete and actually get a place at the table. But what are you going to do when you're at the table? You're just going to sit there and eat from the
No.
same plate. You have to.
You have to be the voice of the fans at that point. And
Exactly.
going back to a point Jim made, it's not about having 34.7% and going toe to toe with Dermot Desmond. That's not going to happen. It's about having an influence, which is something the fans don't have just now. And where do you need to go? I know that previously when David was a chair, David Lowe was a chair, and he stepped away from that because he's got other commitments. That was the drive for 5%, because with 5% you can have the EGM. But what do you do once you get there?
That's it.
And this is a big thing as well. It's having the plan. At the moment, I look at Celtic and I sometimes ask myself, what is the plan, Jim? Because, you know, back in the day when you and your cohorts got together and had a plan, you would be looking at the Celtic board, and although they didn't have the business acumen, they weren't rich as a football club, they still had the same or a similar attitude to the fan base, in that we know what we're doing, we don't want to hear from you. And that's where we are just now with the fans versus the club, because the club has one spokesperson and he's the manager of the football team, right? So he can't answer 99% of the questions that we've got about the football club.
Yeah.
So there are similarities between the board of today and the old regime.
I think a lot has been said about communication, and in any organisation they talk about communication. So if you go back to Save Our Celts, but nobody could, what was the objective? Actually, the objective was to form an independent supporters club. That was it, right? Because what you had back then was association, which maybe had about, I don't know, maybe 7,000-8,000 people, maybe something like that, I don't know. Affiliation, maybe 5,000-6,000, something like that, right? But the majority who went to the game weren't part of that. They went, so what about having maybe a supporters club for the rest, to give them some sort of voice? Because if all the tickets for the cup finals are going to supporters clubs, and I've told the story a million times about the season tickets and being a season ticket holder, you know, having 6,000 tickets and you didn't get a ticket for the cup final when you had 25,000 allocation because they thought, well, we'll just give it to sports clubs. So it's all about actually trying to form an independent supporters club to give a chance for a voice, to have some sort of communication, to say these are the issues that we have. And I know that I've drone on in the podcast about I can't see the big screen, but to me that's endemic of the whole thing. What's changed, I think, dramatically in those 30 years when Fergus introduced it, is the culture of the season tickets. Now, I'll give you an idea. The thing about what I said before is that somebody has to put their head above the parapet, and that's really difficult. Once they do that, you'll know to sell again. They'll be exposing who is this guy, and they'll take on tons of grief. What I'd like to see, and I'm not going to start this honest, right, is a season ticket supporters club, right? Because affiliation, they lobby in that, so 50,000 plus season tickets. Stick a tenner on the price of a season ticket and give that to some separate body that's maybe linked into the club. There's £500,000. Employ 3, 4, 5, 6 people to work on behalf of the season ticket holders, funded by the season holders, so that Jim Moore can see the big screen, right? In fact, we might take money out of that 500 grand to get bonuses. If the club won't do it, the season ticket supporters club will do it. And then they'd be maybe speaking on behalf of 50,000 people. And that's different from saying, I'm not buying Europa League tickets.
Yeah.
I'm talking on behalf of, no, you did leaders and above the parapet people doing that, who would want to do that, and you would make it, you know, time limited. You do that for 5 years, then you move over and somebody else becomes those. You could do something like that. Now, that's entirely possible. Who would do that? I don't know. But there must be young people out there with the enthusiasm to do something like that. Because how simple would that be?
I know.
I'm happy to pay a tenner to be part of a season ticket supporters club. And if Chris Magwin is one of the 5 guys, I'll talk to him and say, get me a monitor so I can see the big screen.
I'll get you.
Go and get some things outside Celtic Park. Go and do this, go and do that.
Working as a
terrible. Go and do
conduit.
one sales, one supporters liaison officer, you know, and because the board are so detached from everything, they don't know what's happening. What would be wrong for the chief executive to go to maybe half a dozen games a season as a fan? Go to Tynecastle. It's been 40 years since I've been to Tynecastle, and it was a death trap back then. You get funneled into the Swedes. Chief executive, go to the games.
Yeah.
You know, put your tammy on, your dark glasses,
experience.
your false beard. Go to the games. Go to the Jockstein stand. Go to the Lisbon Land. Go and stand with the GB and experience what it's like. Give yourself a feel for what things are like.
Yep.
But they're not willing to do that. Or get one of your minions to do that and report back. So there's so many things you think, well, I'm just a fan. And these are not, you know, fantastic ideas. It's kind of common sense. Why wouldn't you do that? The season ticket exchange scheme, whereby at Christmas there, We had about 4 or 5 games at Christmas time, absolutely freezing, 2/3 full stadium, bitterly cold winter days. You know, there'd be loads of people who would have went to those games.
It's low-hanging fruit, Jim. It
It's
really is.
low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, it really
And that's the frustrating thing. And that's about when you you take away the on-field success and you look at the chasm, and there it is. There it is. It's all lying there. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Oh, bit of another rant. But there it all is. Why aren't you doing that? And nothing will change because culture, that's the culture that we have. And you can play musical chairs with the people and they'll still do that. And maybe somebody will be blamed for what's happened in the past week or so. But all that's doing is just shuffling chairs again.
Yeah.
It is, because the head of the football club, regardless of whether or not he is a majority shareholder, he is the head of the football club, isn't going anywhere. So the culture remains. The people that are put into these positions, these lofty positions, some of which you're making almost £1 million a year as a CEO,
Yes.
and you ask yourself, right, what's that based on? Is that based on a track record? With any business as a CEO, or specifically with a football or a sporting organisation as a CEO, no. It's just part of a clique where you've been promoted from within and you've got this role, but you're talking about responsibility. So when you look at Celtic and where we were when we played Bayern Munich in the Allianz, right? And after that game, and even though we got knocked out and the captain's in tears, you're thinking, we were that away.
That was a
right?
pinnacle of.
And that was despite a few things. So in the January, going back to transfer issues, Brendan Rodgers went down to London to sign Kieran Tierney. We couldn't get the deal done. Couldn't get the deal done for whatever reason. And we bring up Jeffrey Schlupp instead, right? Would Kieran Tierney have made a difference in the games against Bayern Munich, in the cup final against Aberdeen? I would suggest yes.
I'd say it's worth the risk.
It's more quality, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Centre forward situation, Kyogo, on the night of the young boys game where we qualify for the knockout. On that night, Kyogo sold for 10 and we buy Jota for 10.
Yes.
Business can be done quickly, Chris, right? But Jota wasn't a replacement for Kyogo. They might have cost the same money, but he's not a replacement. So we ran without a centre forward. And in January, Brendan Rodgers says quite publicly, I need him replaced.
Yes.
He says it publicly, he doesn't get it, right? So there's an issue. Now, after the game against Bayern Munich, where they scored agonisingly late in the game, what we're talking here, seconds before
Yes.
extra time, right? And he speaks about, we need this. We need these little bits of quality in this team to fine-tune it. So this platform is where we remain. Again, he's put that message out, and I'm sitting listening to Brendan, and I'm nodding, because I'm thinking, he shares my ambition as a Celtic fan. Why not do it, Chris? Why haven't we done that? Because that, for me, that's the starting point of where we are now.
Yeah, and this leads to one of my biggest frustrations, and it's this perception, which seems to emanate from within the club hierarchy, that we know what we're doing, we've got all the trophies, look what we've achieved, we don't need your opinion. And I think there's nothing more condescending to me, because there are people of all different occupations and levels of experience and age and tenures and everything within our support who have expertise.
Age, and he points to you.
Tenure.
I noticed that.
tenure.
Intelligence at the law, fair enough.
Tenure and
Skill.
intelligent
Skill.
tenure. But the fact is that you've got no right to profile our supporters. You know, that the hierarchy at the club has no right to profile our supporters and tell us what we do know and what we don't know and what we're good at and what we're not. Now, the fact is that a lot of us work in different industries, work in different businesses. I myself work in risk management, right? And I look at the way the board operates, and everybody says the board are risk averse. They're not risk averse. They're risk allergic. They are completely incapable of forecasting and managing risk, right? Now, they may look at me and say, what do you know about football? Well, as much as any other supporter, I suppose. What do you know about managing risk? Well, quite a bloody lot, you know. And I could.
But is it no more of a risk, Chris, to do what they did?
Well, that
the ineffective nature of their response
this is exactly
more of a risk.
This is exactly where I'm getting to. Anyone who understands the concept of risk management, you understand what your tolerance level is, you plan for it, you forecast it, and you manage it accordingly. So if the board have, let's say, 100 million in the bank, just for the sake of this argument, why not say, well, you know what? We'll sanction 50 million. We'll sanction 10 million for operational costs, keep everybody in a job at the club. We'll sanction X amount, X amount, X amount. And then you say, okay, well, there you go. There's your transfer budget. Go and do with it what you will. And if it works out, fabulous. You generate more revenue further down the line because you're in the Champions League, you're progressing, you're continuing that revenue stream, you're attracting better players who therefore will then again build into the revenue generating element of your business model, right? So it's a no-brainer, right? And if it doesn't work, if the same players say, well, we allocated the budget for that, that's your risk. We can absorb that because we said at the time, that's how much we are prepared to go and spend. And if the manager signs players and they don't work out and we've lost that 40 or 50 million or we're not able to recoup all that, we recoup what we can and the manager takes the hit. And the board says, well, we backed your manager and we go again next year. That's the way the business model should operate. That's what lots of supporters are crying out for. We've got no idea what the business model is at Celtic because they don't tell us anything.
But we can surmise.
We can
right?
surmise.
And what I
based
would
on the
surmise, Chris, right, is what you've said is what I would expect. There's your budget, right? And we're based it on X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
And we don't even need to know the formula, but this is how we've come up with the budget, right? That's not what Celtic do. What Celtic do is you can spend what you bring in. The ring fence it. Now, let's just talk about the last 3 windows, right? So the one that is just slammed shut in our face. We're standing outside that window now in the pissing rain and we're looking in thinking what we could have had, Chris, right? What did we have in terms of a budget? What we brought in? We never even spent it.
Well,
We
it
actually
was-
made a profit. You go back to January. Why did we buy Jota? Because we sold Kyogo. 10 million, right? So no up, no down. You go back to the 3 players we brought in, Trusty, Ida and Engels, 26. Oh, look, Matt O'Reilly cost 26. That's the budget. So they don't do what you say.
No, they don't.
They basically say, right, whatever you bring in, that's what you're shelling out. Before we went into the Balikwisha deal, we had spent more money in Liam Brady's first couple of months in charge than we had going into a Champions League qualifier, Jim.
Everyone who's watching this podcast is going to share your frustration and share your anger because the chasm, and we're all looking down where it is. But I thought it was quite funny what Chris was said there about, the board. I said, what do you know about risk management? I'm happy to say to the powers that be, I know zero about risk management and I have an IQ of 0, but you had 9
We get that on camera.
Champions League qualifiers and you failed to qualify 7 times.
Yep.
So you can call me whatever you want, but 7 times,
Yes.
let's call it 40 million, is 280 million pounds. So call us all the names you want,
Yeah.
but you've lost 280 million pounds.
Exactly.
So who's the idiot here?
Yeah.
So I think we've done this to death. I think we've looked in the chasm and we've got all the facts and we've got all the figures and all the stuff that's happened. And you watch all the podcasts and you hear all the stories and you hear clever guys like Alan Morrison, whose IQ isn't 0, get into the kind of the guts of all the stuff that's kind of happened. It's all there for everyone to see. Why are we frustrated? Because we were knocked out of the Champions League, on-field success, not good. And that transfer window, we're weaker than we were before. So we're looking down the chasm and we're all looking back. And I think we have to look forward. That's my view. I think we have to look forward. What's done is done. And they're in 2 different boxes. The people who own the club and the people who try and manage the football team. The manager and the
Agreed.
players, get behind them. You play for us and we'll sing for you. That's one of the songs that's in the terrace, and that's our back the team. So we can't let whatever's happening over here influence that at all. We have to attack over here, but again, repeating myself again, coordinated, structured, planned, all that kind of stuff. I believe there's things happening with the Celtic Trust, so who knows, maybe that might lead to something.
You know when, right, I'm going to try and play devil's advocate here, right? I've nailed my colours to the mast. I am not a fan of the current regime when it comes to the board. I think the CEO has been promoted beyond his capabilities. I'm not a CEO, that's why I'm not employed as one. I wouldn't pretend to know what a CEO does, but I know that we're failing. Like you say, if you take it right down to the brass bolts of it, we're failing in the respect of failing to bring in players to the point where we're being laughed at by Go Ahead Eagles.
Yeah.
We're being mocked by Benji Siegrist. I mean, Yang's down the road and he's having to be sent back up and they're going,
Shocking.
just to rub, salt into the wounds, they're going sign Paddy Roberts instead. So, right, I put it out there. Everybody knows where I am in relation to that. They also know in terms of how I rate Brendan Rodgers as a manager. Let's for a moment go behind the curtain and say we're part of the board, right?
We are.
And we're looking at the gnashing of teeth, to use a not the view term. And we're saying, well, that's all fair and well, ladies and gentlemen. However, Brendan Rodgers, with his £11 million midfield player and his £8.5 million striker and his £6 million centre half, etc., 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 are coming up against a team that's on a level with St Johnstone, if you want to look at coefficient points. And over 210 minutes, they can't score a goal. Right, discuss. Because I think that we can focus on the board. I think you also need to focus on, despite all that stuff, see, in spite of all that, you leave all that chaos and all that noise at the door, and you get your team in that dressing room, and you line up and you beat Kyra of Almaty, Chris.
Yeah.
So I think there is a shared responsibility here as well.
There's always going to be a shared responsibility. Like, what happens on the field is largely the remit of the manager, right? But I think, like Jim, I like the idea of having the two separate boxes. You've got the running of the club, you've got the football operation, right? One should serve the other, right? Because ultimately, if we don't get results on the pitch, as the manager's rightly said, he's the one whose head's on the chopping block, right? So he's signed an £11 million player, another £9 million player, another £6 million player, and we go with that and we don't beat a team. Okay, you could say that's down to the manager, but for weeks, if not months, leading up to that game, the manager said, I need reinforcements. Give me players and I'll go and do the business. And they haven't done it. And it's been evident they haven't done it. For me, the board should not get to judge what Brendan Rodgers does with his transfer budget. Brendan Rodgers says, I want that player in, I want that player in. If they give him 30 million and he spends it in one player, and they might say, why is he doing that? He's got 30 million, he can spend that in 4 or 5 players. I don't care. That's the manager's...
I think that's a risk.
I think
it's a risk, but it's the manager's...
I don't think any football club would allow that.
I think it's a bit more nuanced.
Of course it is. Look, there'll be discussions, been negotiations, but my point is the manager's the one whose career lives or dies by his decisions, right, on the park. And if he's saying, I need this much money, I need to get that kind of player in, I need reinforcements in this position, this position, this position, I think the board, while they have employed him and while he's performing that role, have a responsibility to support him. Not to support him to the extent where they damage the club, not to support him where they put us into financial peril. We saw what happened to Horizon.
That would, though. If you bought a player at that rate, the wages that would come with that
well, this goes back to my earlier
would
point.
wreck the transfer
Granted,
budget.
but this is where I go back to my earlier point. You calculate your risk and you allocate the funds appropriately. You say we can absorb this much. And if it doesn't go right, we're okay because we've got this much here, right? And they might do that, but we don't know because they don't tell us. So all we can judge it on is our results.
Should he have beaten, after 210 minutes of football, should he have beaten Kyra Almaty with what he had, despite all the chaos and the noise in the background?
Yeah, I've been very clear. I think he should have. Yeah, I think a manager.
You had to do the post-match.
I did. It was not an easy shift, and shout out to Kevin McCluskey for being my wingman on that. I think if you're a top manager, and I firmly believe Brendan Rodgers is a top manager, I think you have to rise to challenging circumstances to get what you need. But as you've said, it's a shared responsibility because that manager is working under challenging conditions that he should not be working under. He is working under more challenging conditions than a manager who's won multiple quadruple trebles, has had an invincible season, has brought success back to the club, should not be working under those restrictive, challenging parameters that he is.
I think that's a different thing from the question you asked. You asked the Kazakhstan team, right?
Yeah.
For me, 50% that's the board, 30% is the manager, 20% is the players. For the other, I got feel.
Yeah, fair.
We should beat that team. I thought the tactics, the team selection weren't good enough, that the players underperformed, whatever. You take that in isolation, 100% right, the manager should do better. I think why I said that was more nuanced, I'll give you a budget.
Well, get your accountant's head on for a minute.
Well, the budget thing, right?
Yeah.
Budget thing, you said, give them a budget, right? Now, that depends how quickly the people in this box act, right? Because I know you said, what was it, 26 million they spent? If they'd have acted properly, that might have cost 15 million. So if they decide you've got a budget of 15 million, they said, those are the 3 players I want,
Yes.
go and get them.
Exactly.
And for all we know, he did say that, and they footed and it became 26 million. And then unfortunately, back to my Jesse G analogy, it's not about the price tag, that we don't like Engels because he cost 11 million. No, his fault he cost 11 million pounds. It's the board's fault he cost 11 million pounds. He should have cost maybe 7, right? So that's where it becomes a bit more nuanced in terms of trying not to get fixated about how much things cost.
Yes.
But what you want is a structure. What you want, not just in football, but in life, is people to do the very best that they can. And if you do the very best you can, and you feel, well, at least you've done the best you can. I don't think the people in this box over here have done in fact, I think some of them have done the best they can, but the point you're making is that they don't have the skills to do it. You know, it's Geppetto, not Pinocchio, we should be looking at, as opposed to the puppets over here. You know, so I think it is a bit more nuanced. I'm always fascinated by, if you're the manager of Celtic in the current day Celtic, who have got 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 times the resources of some of the opposition that we're playing, and you win the treble, which is a brilliant achievement. How much of an achievement is that? Under 18 team, under 12 league, you know? So when you come up against that team the other week, you should be taking care of them. No doubt you should be taking care of them. But keep the two boxes separate, I think is my kind of message for today, and then see what we can do in both boxes.
Yeah, when we're talking about budgets, right, and we're talking about how you allocate your spend, a big part of that budget is you're not going in there saying I only need one player. So
Yeah.
you're going in there saying I need 4 players, right? Then why are we bringing in 10, many of whom will not feature, you know? And this is a club issue, and Brendan was using the language for a while. He's obviously been told not to use it. I mean, we get told, well, you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. But if one day Brendan Rodgers comes out and starts referring to signings as club signings, and then the next time he completely changes tack and he says players for the future, it's because somebody in the PR team's told him don't say that. Because that creates the division.
We're signing off the same hymn sheet, sorry, Chris. Oh, yeah, we're signing off the hymn sheet. And also, I mean, I said this in the podcast a few times, there should be some ongoing strategy for signing players. What I said off the top of my head was, every window we bring in 2 first-team starters. That's what we bring in.
Make that a
Two
target. A bench.
every single time.
That's 4 a
So,
season.
so net, we bring in 2 net. If we lose 2, we bring in 4.
Yeah.
And what you do is that you're not bringing in players to try and bolster the squad. Even though you like Alistair Johnson or Cam Carter-Vickers, we want 2 players to make them on the bench, make them fight for their place. And we don't do that because we say, well, Carter-Vickers is fine. No, he's not. We can get better than that. And that should always be the aim. And if you're doing that every transfer window, as you said, each season you're getting 4 better players than you've got. So in 3 years, you've got 12, you've got a whole team who are better than before. That should be, I think, a simple target. And by all means, buy a few youngsters who'd be a bit of potential there. And you can buy 10 of them if you want. If you budget for you. The money to do that, knock yourself out. But in terms of who's in the team and who's visible to it, so boys like, he bought the boy from Fulham, who Osmond, right?
Yeah.
You know, fine, knock yourself out. But we want the main guy in there, whoever the main guy is. We don't actually have
Secondary objectives, Jim, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like you've got that side of developing the football club for the future, but you need to sort the immediate term out. You know, we've got gaps in the immediate term. We've got a manager with a system that relies on wingers. He's got no wingers at the club. It's an insane.
There's a leak in the roof.
Yes,
Sort that first
exactly.
before you buy the curtains.
Yeah.
See the thing, Chris, right? You mentioned something there, and I say it without thinking, about the level of Brendan Rodgers as a manager. Jim and I have had over the piece.
Oh, is this elite?
That's my word was culture, and the word that
Move my
used
chair
to,
back.
Jim's word that we used to talk about. But I'm not saying you called him an elite manager, but it was this term elite. What is an elite manager? So last year, I realised a lot of people, you know, it's hard to actually gauge what is elite and what's not. Do you need to be in the top 3 of a top 6 league to be classed as elite? Perhaps. If that's the case, a few years ago, Brendan Rodgers was an elite manager when he was the manager of Liverpool. Last season, he was a Champions League manager. Maybe that's not an elite manager. But we always say this, we're just like, oh, we've got this quality of a manager. How good is he, Jim? Because I felt when he came in first time round, he was sensational initially. Sensational. I mean, the football we played, the players that he purchased. But there came a point, well, it was a different version of it.
I'm on the fence.
Yeah, so where is he,
Yeah.
in your view?
I'm on the fence. First, it was great when he first came in.
Yeah.
We've got the ex-Liverpool manager, so you couldn't have done any better than that. Again, you're looking at the opposition that we're playing. We should be beating these teams. Right? We're getting to Europe, the big boys' playgrounds, and we get a few embarrassing results.
You've got this new team, this new entity just entering the Premiership called Rangers,
Yeah.
who are building up.
So
We're
I
punting
was-
them 5-0, 5-1.
So I thought the first season was really good. The second season, the football became a bit, not so sure about this, and then it came downhill rapidly. And I think a lot of people blamed him for leaving from the fact that everything's happening in this dysfunctional box over here. That's why he left. You know, and I think people retrospectively were sympathetic for him leaving because they're seeing things that happen now, thinking, well, if he does it again, then we could understand because that's what's sitting over here.
Yep.
The discussion we had was at the time, maybe 5 years ago now, it must have been that we first started the deal. The thing was about, we've got an elite manager, and I said, well, I don't think he's an elite manager because elite to me is Pep and Josie and Klopp and Ancelotti and these guys. That's elite.
Josie.
Josie, as if I know him. Me and Josie are bezies. So So that's elite. So, because if he was elite, well, what does that mean then? So elite to me, and I said, well, defence is your definition of elite. And I think it's somebody who one of the top teams in the world would go for and they get success. It's different going for somebody so that Alex Ferguson was elite. You go for Moyes, he's going to manage Man United. Well, that makes him elite. No, unless he's successful. If he's successful, he becomes elite. So that was always my kind of definition of how elite worked. I said in the podcast at the time, I was disappointed I'm coming back. Not because I didn't want him back, because I thought it's a lack of imagination. Again, we're doing this box again. We're doing what they always do. That either we have no idea there's a big wide football world out there, and all we know is people who used to play for us. Every time there's a transfer window, let's get Eddie back. Let's get Paddy Roberts back. Sure, Armstrong, he's...
What's Chris Dyer doing?
Keir Tierney. Keir Tierney for me was like, what you want, particularly for the younger generation, is new heroes. They want young, hungry players, and they're all out there, and they're gettable. And it frustrates the life out of me, but people in this box, they say, well, the players we want, you have to wait to the end of the transfer. And the guys that was brought in, you hope they're really, really good. You hope they're good. And the young lad that played on Sunday, okay, it's his first game, so you can't judge that, but he didn't look. I was looking for somebody to come on, make his debut,
galvanise.
Tavernier, I'll take you on, score a couple of goals, like Musa did. And Musa came, said, look at this guy, this is good. And I don't mean anything against the guy, but he just looked a bit underwhelming last week. That was too big an occasion. Who knows? But if you're signing new players and you're paying £5 million, you want them to hit the ground running, because these guys in the box over here telling us, we waited and we got the guy we wanted, the £5 million guy. And as people have said, I saw things on social media today, people like Kevin Nisbet, I'm not saying we should sign him, but he went to Aberdeen for 300 grand. And we're struggling for players, and that would have been a sticking plaster.
Yeah.
And I know there was a slag for that, I'm not here saying Kevin Nisbet, but that would have been a sticking plaster, and that he would have got his goals. And I think anyone, and I said this as a joke in the ACSOM chat the other day, it was like, your namesake was getting mentioned, Lyndon Dykesy.
Yeah.
We should send Lyndon Dykes. And I said, well, he scored bags of goals with the service we'd get. Hold on. Maybe we wouldn't get much service. So that's dysfunctional, and we have to sort that.
Yeah.
But getting back to the team again, let's not make this another COVID season. There's no reason why it should be. We've got the team, not as good a quality as we'd like it to be, but they're there. And they've made a really good start to the domestic season, so let's get behind them, let's support them. And at the same time, let's think of something to deal with this box over here.
Yeah. So, Chris, taking it right up to this week, picture the scene. Brendan Rodgers leaves Celtic. The first thing I'll ask you is, where is his place in the, in terms of football manager, the status, I'm not going to use the E word, the status of football manager? Where is his next destination? Where is he now? Because are people looking at that situation and saying, right, Brendan Rodgers seems to have a bit of baggage. And whilst that's a dysfunctional football club right now, something has been created by the manager who's unwilling to take on a player and say, is that going to improve my squad, yes, no, or otherwise, or will I just not play him? Because that happened last season with Nawrocki. It kind of happened where he was washing his hands of Inamura and Yamada.
Yep.
So where is his place in the football food chain for you?
I think it's still relatively high. I mean, there's not many managers that don't come with a degree of baggage. I mean, Jim mentioned one earlier. He's Paul Jose.
Jose, he said.
Jose. Yes, Jose and Frankie as well. But no, Jose Mourinho, for example, does come with baggage. But clubs will look at him and say, we can absorb the baggage because he gets results. He wins trophies. He's someone that brings success. He's box office as well. Brings the profile of the club up. I would say Brendan Rodgers is maybe around there. He's a guy that people would look like and say, okay, he's been up there. We don't rate the league, but he's had a lot of success up there. He's done well in Europe this year. So there'd be maybe clubs throughout the continent would say, we take him. I don't think he'd maybe get a job as high profile as Liverpool now. I think that's beyond him now. I think, that level of football is possible.
He can speak Spanish.
Absolutely.
Apparently.
He's got a good property empire out there, I believe. But I don't mean to be disrespectful to say that that's moved beyond him, but I don't think his achievements would attract those type of clubs. There's still a stigma about Scottish football, I think, and the fact that he's not really had the success at Leicester You know, he came very, very close with Liverpool. Had some success at Leicester, but not, you know, necessarily what you'd expect a team like Manchester City or Liverpool or any team like that to look at. But there would definitely be clubs out there that would look at him and think, wow, he would raise the profile of our club.
See, timing wise, I think if he leaves Leicester after 3 seasons, absolutely, he's still in the game.
Yeah.
He's still in the game, but it didn't finish. It didn't end well. It didn't end well for his time at Celtic first time round. And when you look at the way things have happened and the dysfunctional nature of a relationship between the football manager and, you know, those who are making the decisions at the football club, I'm going to ask you, Jim, you're talking about communication. How disappointing is it when the manager is saying a lot of the things that we're saying on the podcast when it comes to recruitment, ambition, Champions League, progress? I'm not some guy to maintain it. And then he comes back out the following week and gives you a different message. How disappointing is that? Because it's obvious to anybody watching that he's been kind of told to toe the party line.
Yeah.
It's disconcerting, I think, is what it is. There's a bit of me thinks that, a bit like Roy Keane, like, that's your job, get on with it. Don't moan, get on with it. Because there'll be people tuning into this who, I'm long retired, who are working. And when you work, you don't always get what you want. You know, this computer's 5 years old, it keeps breaking down. I'm trying to cook these pizzas, these ovens, I'm driving this van and it's always breaking down, and blah, blah. So you have to make do and get on with things.
Control what you can control, right?
Control what you can control, and you can be unhappy about things. He's obviously a very clever man, and he knows what he's saying when he says it, because given the level of scrutiny that you've got these days with social media, with everyone's poring over body language and what have you, and he says something along the lines of, I'll just coach the players up given. And kind of that's what it should be, I suppose.
I agree with that.
You know, part of it is you should be identifying players and then they go out and get them for you, but whoever you get, you can be disappointed, but don't tell us you're disappointed, because go on, that's your job, go on with it. And that'd be the thing for me that, as I said before, the squad be good enough, the squad we have got just now is good enough to win a treble again. And I would like to see, come May, the manager standing on a Hampden pitch, that's the third leg of the treble, because that's what it should be with Celtic. We have the players to do that. Alistair Johnson, hopefully he's back, whenever he's back in a month or two's time. Jota's back. So we've said a couple of wingers, who knows, they could be brilliant, these guys. If Maeda finds his form again, you know, we haven't lost a goal yet. So I think that there's not a happy clapper that we've made a good start at the domestic season. We don't like all this stuff over here, but let's not affect that. And let's kick on. Let's kick on. But in terms of the manager, I just think that coach the team, do the best you can. And if you don't have all the tools, the point you made earlier, give him the tools to do the job. He's not been given all the tools to do the job.
No,
I think he's been given the tools to do the job, given who we play. And that's another kind of bugbear of mine, that, and this is back years about, how much you have to pay players to play in Scotland. Now, in Hearts are the third biggest team. What's the most they'd be paying a player? A few grand a week, $3-4 a week, something like that.
Yep.
So if you ignore the team across the city, then why would you be paying £40,000 for people? You don't really have to do that. Get into Europe, and I saw the thing about, I had Lawrence today talking about the agent saying, well, unless you're paying over 25 grand a week, don't call me, call somebody else, type of thing. So I think there's a bit of a balance in there. What was the question? The question was that just do your job.
See, the thing with the manager, and I know that modern football's changed so much, right? And you do get people who are in positions who are coaches and do basically inherit players and work with the players. I don't think that's what we had with Ange, right? I think what we had with Ange Postecoglou was a really sweet spot whereby he would identify certain players. You can definitely hang your hat on guys like Aaron Moy, right? Because he knew him from the Australian setup, Kyogo, all the Japanese imports, right? Well, how much did he know about Matt O'Reilly? Probably not much. Matt O'Reilly was somebody that ended up on his desk, right?
Same with Jota and Carter Vickers takes, isn't it?
Joe Hart. Joe Hart, we had spoken to a year before Ange came in the building.
Right.
So there was a combination of club fines through the recruitment and the scouting, but also, look, I've got this guy and I want to work with him and he's going to be perfect for what we've done. So I think there's a middle ground whereby the manager should be involved, but will never have full
No,
control over the guys coming in.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of managers have said that. I mean, I think Gordon Strachan might be one of the more recent ones.
Fed up with it. He was
Yeah.
like, he was
He
happy. for the
was
club to
like,
take a place.
I can't judge a player. I don't want, I'll coach them, but I don't want to sign them. I'm not a good judge.
Unless
judge
it's
of
called
potential.
Paul Telfer, I'm not signing.
Signed Bill of Flood, didn't he? But
Did he?
poor,
Did he though?
that's well, poor Willow. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that the manager should have a degree of control. Can't have the full control, because that would be detrimental to the rest of the operation. And I think he needs the right people alongside him to say, no, Gaffer, do you know what? Actually, there's, I'm not convinced on that. I always liked listening to Johan Mjalby, big Johan, talking about when he went to scout Virgil van Dijk, and he went out and he watched the player. And he said himself, he said, Virgil didn't have a great game, but he saw something in him.
Yep.
And I think you need people like that who can recognise the potential. You need people that can go to the manager and give him a real informed opinion. I'm not sure if anyone's doing that at the club at the moment. I think they're using data, which is fair enough. Data's the right starting point. But I think you need someone who can see past the data. How are they going to fit in at our club? How are they going to adapt to the culture?
Even
What's
the
their personality like?
Yeah.
How are they going to be when all the Hearts fans are shouting at them? Is their head going to go down? Is it going to go up? Are they showing that degree of resilience? You need to look at all the different characteristics and give the manager your first, second, third option and say, Gaffer, here's why he's a top. Here's why he's maybe the third choice. And here's somewhere in between. Here's maybe a guy who'll give you maybe some of the best of both worlds. And the manager says, you know what, that makes sense. I get that. If it's all the data, I've had all the characteristics right, I think I can work with that guy. And I think ultimately it has to be the manager's decision to say, that's the player I want. But at the moment, we've got a manager saying, I don't know who we're signing. I don't know if
I don't know what my budget is.
what's my budget? That's not nothing to do with me, nothing to do with me. So as a manager, I manage people at the moment. If somebody says, I hired this person for you, there you go. I'm like, I've never met this person. I've never spoke to this person. I don't even know if this person is honest. You can't operate like that. There has to be cohesion. There has to be
What's
synergy.
your CV, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
What I mean is you have to be aligned, right? The running the football club has to have a say in the running of the football operation, but the football operation, the success and the progress of the football operation has to depend on a degree of support from the.
But I think also you need it to be joined up. I'm going to bust it right
Connected.
there because you said a bit like the fast show guys. Oh, did it? Did it, sir? Did it really, sir? Did it? Suits you?
Does
Did it? Suits you, sir? Suits you, sir?
Yeah.
Because to me, I am fascinated with people like Alan Morrison, Jacko James, the Huddle guys. Like, they said from the start, Engels isn't a good fit here. Here's why. Like, and it's not some Chris McElwain giving an opinion. I don't like him.
Yeah.
He's looking at data and he's saying, this is how he's played.
So
These are the
Yang as well.
positions.
Yes.
These are the positions. This is what we've done. Da 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 da. Unless the manager does something different, this guy is not a good fit. And that's exactly how it's turned out. So you're thinking, the point you made there was that, okay, when he goes for Engels, how much is the manager involved in looking at that and thinking, fair enough, because I'll not play him in that position, And this, and we talked about the eye test before, as if that's something, if that's something off with the eye test, he passed the eye test. We look at players and he's really good. Buy him, do something, buy him, because he'll be good, without thinking, well, how is he going to fit into this structure and the way we're going to play? And if Alan Morrison and the guys are saying right from the get-go, if you buy him, he's not going to fit there. So if it's not the manager that's buying the players, somebody else should be able to say, well, that's not the Brendan plays.
Yeah.
Where's this Brendan going to play him?
Absolutely.
So that he then says, Brendan, I think it's in the young guy, Arnie Engels, great potential, blah, 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 blah. He plays in such and such a position, but I know you don't play that way. What do you think? Well, I don't want him. I want somebody who
That's
can
the
play in
football
that
doctor's
position.
role, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's your joined up thinking. That it's not about saying he's a good player. It's about saying he's a good player that will fit into your system.
Absolutely.
And the thing you talked about earlier about how will the manager be viewed, inflexible is the word I would use.
Yeah.
That,
Yep.
and I said this podcast the other week, that we've got 6 really good midfield players at the moment. There's only 3 spaces.
Yes.
Make 4 spaces for them. You can get 4 of those guys in there. Particularly if you want the wingers. Playing Nigrin and outside right and Sunday.
Play your 11 best players.
Ridiculous.
How about that?
We had four strikers on the bench. There's
Ridiculous.
one and one on the park.
Yeah.
It's like, so you're going to substitute the striker 4 times during a game to get them on it, and yet you've got nobody to play in the wings. So it's square pegs for round holes. So.
Without any of that too detailed, because you go on into that about that, how bad that performance was. And the point you're making is about being joined up and
Yes.
knowing what you're doing. And that sits within that box as well. So it all has to be joined up, punchline the story.
Yeah, agree.
No, absolutely loads to talk about in the coming weeks and months, and you'll do it all here on a Celtic State of Mind. Thank you once again, Jim Orr and Chris McElwain, for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.
Thanks again for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind. Come back at 6 o'clock next Friday for This Is ACSOM.